Howdy folks, welcome to the Rafter K Rustics workshop. You know, most times when I've done these videos, it's mostly stupid stuff, because it's what I find funny. But every now and then there is a gem of something worthwhile that's mixed into it. It's just kind of hard to see for the dumb stuff. This video is going to be different because this is something that I think that guys that like to work with wood and like to do this kind of stuff need to think about, and I think it can really make a difference in your day. I like my little workshop, but you know how it is. You first set it up and then you find out what works and doesn't work, and you end up redecorating it a couple of times, which is kind of fun in itself. But I made a mistake when I first set it up that might have ruined my back. You guys ever hurt your lower back? Seems like there's two ways kind of that it happens with me. The first one is like one time, like when my youngest son was about 4 years old, my wife made him a little quarter pipe for his skateboard, and he's a little kid going up and down and he's having a good time. And I looked back on my days with a skateboard and I thought, I can do that. So anyway, I was laying on my back on the driveway and I could see about 3/4 up the garage door where the skateboard had flown up and hit it and left a nice little dent. And this little sucker kid was falling over against the car laughing. And I went through that daddy checklist, you know the one. Now, wiggle the toes, check. Can I wiggle my fingers? Check. Reach bags there. Feel like a busted melon in the back? Nope, that's still solid. Check. Hell, when I caught my breath, I was even able to get up and chase the kid down. Of course, it wasn't too hard because he was laughing so hard. God, geez, they're terrible little animals. But anyway, didn't seem like there was anything wrong. And then about 3 nights later, I was in bed and I woke up in the middle of the night trying to roll over. And Lord, it felt like someone was shanking me with a hot chunk of rebar in my lower back. And I was in agony for weeks after that. And the hard part was I had no idea what had caused the problem because it didn't start hurting until several days after I'd fallen. And there's a second way that this happens, and that's like what happened to me the other day. I was working on the table saw and I bent over, kind of twisted, and was raising up the blade on the table saw, and I felt a little pop in my lower back, and then I could feel it starting to seize up, and I knew I was in trouble. So I went into the house and I got an ice pack and some aspirin, and after a few days and maybe a week and a trip to the cryotherapy place, I was back to being okay. So with that in mind, a while back I was doing some dovetailing. I was making, in fact I was working on this little recipe cookbook stand for my Etsy store. By the way, a link to the store will be in the description below. And it's kind of hard to see from looking at it, but there's several places on it where it's dovetailed. And I hadn't used my dovetail jig in a long time. And like I said, there's several places to do it on this particular piece. So the setup went through not only a lot of little intricate sets, but also I ran a bunch of test pieces, and it took a long time to get it all set up. And a couple of days later, I woke up and again my back was seized and I couldn't figure out what I had done. I hadn't been hauling hay down the hill or anything. I hadn't lifted any heavy lumber. I couldn't figure it out. So about a week later I was feeling better, so I went back into the wood shop and I started doing some more dovetailing, and I started feeling this little tension, I don't know how another word for it. My back started feeling tweaked again. And I realized that the reason I was having a problem was the mistake I'd made in setting up my shop. So I have my dovetail jig set up on this table. It seems like it's at a good work height. But if you watch when I'm running my router, you can see that by natural tendency, I'm bent a little bit at the waist. I'm also kind of tensed up a little bit because I'm so focused on making this router move smoothly across. And as I go across the jig, my body is twisting a little bit. And I did that enough times during the course of that day that I screwed up my back. So the next day, I took this little router table I made and set it on top of this little cart, and I raised up my dovetail jig so that it's now actually a little bit above my elbows, and now I'm naturally standing straight up and down as I move the rig across. And I can tell you, I've done literally hours of dovetailing since then. When I built the kitchen cabinets, I did a lot of dovetailing on the drawers, and I haven't had an issue since. Also, when I did that, I raised up my little router table over here that I use for doing mortises and tenons, and again, I've done an awful lot of them since, and I haven't had any issues with my back. Now, I wouldn't take my word for it because, I mean, look at my other videos. What do I know? But I did go to the source of all wisdom, the internet, and I looked on a couple of woodworking sites to see what they said. And they said that a workstation should be about 34 to 39 inches tall. Now, my original table over there was 37 inches. And I said I thought it wrecked my back pretty bad, so I personally think they should reconsider that number. I also went to a thing called Healthline and asked what a proper workspace or workstation height should be, and they said that it should be, if your elbows are at 90 degrees while you're working, that's about right. That's probably with a desk and a keyboard. But I would think it'd be the same thing with a router or with any other thing you're doing in a workshop. So in my case, according to that, it should be about 45 inches. I'm about 6 feet tall, and it should be about 45 inches. This is more like 48, 49 inches, the way I have the dovetail jig set up, which bends my elbows a little bit, but it's been a saving grace for me. And I know it seems like such a silly little thing, but a little mistake like that setting up your shop can not only ruin the experience, but you get to my age, I guess it could also probably damage your health a little bit. So it's something to look at, and I hope it saves somebody else out there some of the pain that I went through in figuring it out. Now it's time to get back to some of the dumb stuff that I usually do. I think we're going to do, before I go, I want to do one of the Rafter K. Rustic's Advice to the Lovelorn columns. Yeah, the advice column is where I pretend that some knucklehead sent me a comment asking for advice on something I don't know anything about. It's going to keep going that way until some knucklehead actually asks me for advice on a topic I know nothing about. And that won't happen until enough people subscribe to the channel, like my videos, share them with their friends, and I get more viewers. So really, it's up to you how long this farce is going to continue. So anyway, here goes. Let me grab the letter of the day. Dear Guy, I think his name Tim, but I'm not sure because I'm a real person and not some made-up internet knucklehead you had to invent because you don't have enough viewers. My girlfriend Tiffany and I made the mutual decision to go vegan for our own health and for the good of the planet. Wow. It's the least we can do for our future kids and grandkids who are going to foot the bill for all the stupid things our government does. On the other hand, I really miss barbecue, and sometimes I smell hickory smoke and I think I'm going to drown in my own spit. On the other hand, Tiffany is a really cute girl and she has an amazing pair of hoodies that I would like to get to know really, really well. What do I do? Signed, Confused in Carolina. Well, Confused, this is a dilemma. It took me a while to realize that in the war of the sexes, Young men hit the battlefield with a bouquet of flowers, hoping to get laid. Young women, on the other hand, deploy with weapons of mass destruction, planning to take over the world. I ain't taking sides, I'm just reporting it how I see it. But your predicament does kind of remind me of a story. You see, there was a small farm town out in central Texas where they had only one restaurant, kind of a bar thing that they called the drive-in. And every Friday night at exactly 6:30, an old cowboy came in and he ordered 3 beers. And he'd go sit at a table and put 2 beers in front of 2 empty chairs, and he'd put the third one in front of himself. And he'd proceed to drink out of each mug a little bit at a time until all 3 of them were empty, and then he'd leave. Now finally, after years of this, the owner of the joint couldn't take it anymore. And one Friday night he goes, "Bill, you know you can order those beers one at a time. That way you always have a cold, bubbly, fresh one in front of you." And the old cowboy said, "Yeah, I know that. But you see, I have these 2 brothers that I'm really close to, but life's kind of dragged one of them to Wyoming and one of them to Arizona and me out here. And we don't get to see each other except for funerals and such. So we made a ritual, I guess you'd call it. Every Friday night we sit down at the same time and order 3 beers and drink them at the same time. It's almost like we were together. And you know, it means a lot to all of us." Now, as luck would have it, the old cowboy was down by the creek picking some dewberries for his breakfast one morning, a little bit later, and he got a little closer to a water moccasin than he intended to, and sometime between when his arm started swelling up and when the antivenom was applied, he not only found religion, but as sometimes happens, he made some commitments that, he otherwise maybe wouldn't have made those promises. So anyway, after he healed up, he joined the local Baptist church. Now you can imagine the pastor's frustration when one Friday night he brought his wife to the drive-in for supper. And there sat Bill at a table by himself with 2 half-empty beers. The pastor shook his head and said, "Now, Brother Bill, we've discussed this before. You know that our flock does not partake of the demon alcohol." Old Bill just smiled and said, "Of course, preacher, but just because I got religion and had to quit drinking don't mean my brother's got to quit." Anyway, confused, I hope that helps. You can find a solution to your little problem from it.